Wrestling isn't just about the biggest, baddest, and toughest. It's also about looking damn good while doing it. Some moves don't just get the job done. They make you jump out of your seat, replay the clip, and question if what you just saw was even real. The perfect blend of impact, style, and that unexplainable wow factor. Today, in part 1, we're counting down the top 10 best-looking wrestling moves of all time. From high-flying spectacles to devastating strikes, these are the moves that made legends, and left opponents wondering what hit them. So lace up your boots, hit that like button, and let's get into it. Few moves in professional wrestling capture the perfect blend of grace, impact, and showmanship quite like the flying elbow drop. A staple of high flyers and charismatic performers, this maneuver isn't just about jumping off the top rope, it's about soaring through the air, captivating the audience, and crashing down with picture-perfect precision. While many have executed the move over the years, it was Macho Man Randy Savage who turned it into an art form, setting the gold standard for what a flying elbow should look like. Savage's execution was flawless. Climbing the turnbuckle with a slow, deliberate intensity, he'd pause for just a moment, just long enough for the crowd's anticipation to peak, before launching himself into the air. His form was impeccable. Arms bent, elbows tucked in, and legs perfectly straight, giving the move a sleek, almost cinematic quality. And then, like a meteor falling from the sky, he'd descend, driving his elbow deep into the chest of his unfortunate opponent. The impact was always exaggerated with a dramatic bounce, selling the move's devastation in a way that made it feel like a legitimate match ender. But Savage wasn't the only wrestler to make the flying elbow famous. Shawn Michaels incorporated it into his arsenal as a tribute to the Macho Man, adding his own flair by leaning back mid-air and snapping forward at the last moment, creating a breathtaking visual. CM Punk also paid homage, using the move frequently during his WWE career, while Kairi Sane modernized the maneuver with her own version, the Insane Elbow, where she adds a theatrical leap before landing with extra force. What makes the flying elbow one of the best-looking moves ever isn't just its elegance, it's the drama. Whether it's the build-up, the airtime, or the emphatic landing, the move feels like a moment, a punctuation mark in the match. When done correctly, it leaves fans gasping, proving that sometimes the simplest moves, executed with perfection, can be the most spectacular. There's very few moves in professional wrestling that defy physics quite like the shooting star press. A breathtaking combination of agility, precision, and daredevil athleticism, this aerial maneuver isn't just a wrestling move, it's a spectacle. Watching a wrestler launch themselves off the top rope, execute a backflip in midair, and crash down onto their opponent is nothing short of mesmerizing. The move requires perfect balance, body control, and an insane amount of confidence. One slight miscalculation can result in disaster, making it one of the most impressive and dangerous maneuvers in wrestling history. While the shooting star press has been performed by many wrestlers over the years, it was Jushin Thunder Liger who is credited with inventing the move in the late 1980s. The legendary Japanese junior heavyweight innovated a maneuver that would go on to become one of wrestling's most visually stunning high-flying moves. But it was Billy Kidman who popularized it in the WCW, using a slightly more rugged version as his signature finisher. Unlike some others, Kidman's shooting star press wasn't always the prettiest, but that unpredictability added to its appeal. Every time he hit it, it felt like he was barely controlling the rotation, making it all the more exciting. Then came Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 19. In an infamous botch, Lesnar attempted a shooting star press on Kurt Angle but under-rotated, landing directly on his head. While he miraculously avoided serious injury, the moment became a cautionary tale about just how difficult this move is to execute, even for an elite athlete. On the other side of the spectrum, Evan Bourne, or Matt Seidel on the Indies, delivered one of the cleanest, most beautiful shooting star presses of all time. His version, dubbed the Airborne, was executed with such smoothness and height that it looked effortless, despite being one of the hardest moves to pull off. Pac, formerly, Neville also mastered a picture-perfect version, often incorporating it into his high-flying arsenal. What makes the shooting star press one of the best-looking moves ever is its sheer elegance. The mid-air flip, the dramatic hang time, and the moment of impact make it a jaw-dropping sight every single time. When executed flawlessly, it's not just a wrestling move, it's poetry in motion. There's something poetic about a big boot done right. No flips, no theatrics, no unnecessary flash, just one enormous boot smashing a man's face into the back row. It's a move so effective that it doesn't matter if the guy delivering it is the most skilled technician or a brawler with 2 left feet. If you've got the height, the power, and a leg big enough to double as a tree trunk, you've got yourself a match ender. While the move itself has existed for decades, no one owned the big boot quite like Hulk Hogan in the 1980s. Hogan wasn't known for his technical prowess, but when he raised that massive boot and sent an opponent tumbling down like a bowling pin, the crowd erupted. The sequence was always the same: point to the opponent, hit the ropes, boot, and then drop the leg for the inevitable 3 count. It wasn't fancy, but it was effective. But let's be honest, Hogan's boot, while iconic, wasn't always the prettiest. It was a little slow, a little floaty, and sometimes looked more like he was nudging a door open rather than caving in a guy's skull. If you wanted a big boot that looked like it could legally be classified as assault, you had to look at The Undertaker and Test. The Undertaker's big boot was a thing of beauty. When he hit it, it wasn't just a strike, it was a statement. Whether it was launching Shawn Michaels inside Hell in a Cell or nearly booting Brock Lesnar into the 10th row, the dead man's execution was always crisp. His long legs and freakish agility made his version one of the best in the business. Then there was Test, a guy who may not get enough credit for how brutal his big boot looked. At 6'6", Test had a natural advantage, but he also whipped his leg forward with insane speed, making it look like his opponents had just gotten into a head-on collision with a semi-truck. When he connected, the sound was sickening. The impact was devastating, and the sell job from his opponents usually involved them collapsing like a building in a controlled demolition. In an era where wrestling moves keep getting more complicated, the big boot remains a perfect example of why simplicity works. One kick, one impact, one knockout moment, and the crowd eats it up every single time. There are wrestling moves, and then there are moments. The Stone Cold Stunner is both. It's not just a finishing move, it's an event. The second Steve Austin kicked someone in the gut, you knew what was coming, and yet it never got old. Whether he was stunning The Rock, Vince McMahon, or some poor guy just trying to enjoy a beer, Austin's signature move wasn't just about beating opponents, it was about stealing the show. The Stunner's brilliance lies in its simplicity. A quick boot to the midsection bends the opponent forward, and then, BAM! Austin grabs their head, drops down, and drives their jaw into his shoulder. But what made the move truly legendary was the way people sold it. No one did it quite like The Rock, who took a basic jawbreaker and turned it into a cinematic masterpiece. Some nights, he'd flip entirely out of the ring after taking a stunner. Other nights, he'd flail around like a fish out of water as if Austin had just hit him with a missile. Scott Hall's sell at WrestleMania 18 was another classic, bouncing up into the air as if he'd been struck by lightning. Of course, Vince McMahon had the opposite problem. His stunner reactions were so hilariously bad they became iconic in their own right. The first time Austin ever stunned McMahon on Raw, Vince collapsed in the most awkward, stiff-bodied flop ever recorded on television. And yet, that moment launched one of wrestling's greatest rivalries. The origins of the move trace back to Johnny Ace, who popularized a variation called the Ace Crusher. But it was Mikey Whipwreck in ECW who showed Austin the move, leading to its eventual evolution into the stunner we know today. Once Austin got his hands on it, though, he turned it into something completely different. Oh, what made the stunner so special wasn't just its impact. It was how and when it was delivered. Austin could hit it out of nowhere, whether it was in the middle of a match, during a contract signing, or just after a post-match beer toast. It was the ultimate exclamation point. Even today, decades after Austin retired, a stunner still gets the biggest pop of the night whenever he delivers one. It's proof that some moves don't just define a wrestler, they define an era. Well, that's all for part 1, and a big thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of our future content. See you in the next video.